We are stepping into a labyrinth of mirrors, a place where AI merely reflects what it learns, and humanity mistakes that reflection for truth. There are books that don't attempt to predict the future, but compel readers to confront the present, where the line between knowledge and illusion is dissolving. Money, GPT, AI, and the Threat to the Global Economy is one such book. James Rickards doesn't speak of technology as a miracle. He speaks of it as a mirror reflecting the human mind, exposing our obsession with control, precision, and blind faith in logic. The book isn't a mere warning about machines taking over, but a cold analysis of how humanity is gradually ceding to AI the power to define truth. When every financial, political, or ethical decision can be simulated by probability, what remains to determine the value of a choice? Rickards forces readers to confront that terrifying question. If everything we know is mediated through machines, what then is truly real? That question isn't meant to sow fear, but to rekindle an almost forgotten ability, the ability to doubt. Doubt once saved humanity in war, in finance, in science, and now it needs to be restored to save us from the very intelligence we created. This book doesn't end with a solution, but with a mirror. Those who dare to look into it will see not only technology changing, but the very perception of human selfhood dissolving. And the final question echoes, cold yet clear, in an era where AI knows all the answers. Will humanity still possess the courage to ask the right question? Dawn broke on what seemed like another ordinary day in the world of finance. A faint light filtered onto the screens of computer racks, where humans and machines held their breath at every market fluctuation. Nick Meza, a man who had lived half his life in numbers, entered his trading room. He no longer needed staff, just a soft voice saying, "Good morning, Nick. Everything is stable. Long-term interest rates are still high but flat, the dollar is slightly up, oil is stable, gold unchanged. Japanese and Chinese markets are down 1%, Nasdaq is slightly up." The female voice didn't come from a human, but from Sarah, an AI system trained on billions of data points. Nick nodded. He preferred listening to Sarah over staring at flickering charts. Her voice made the numbers come alive, gave them a rhythm, but hidden within that convenience was something cold. Sarah didn't know how to wait, didn't know fear, didn't know how to stop. She only understood commands. Nick mumbled, "Buy 10 million 10-year government bonds. Overnight funding." Sarah took only 30 seconds to confirm. No one knew if the other end of the line was a person or a machine. Everything happened with suspicious smoothness. He knew he was taking a massive gamble, but the market always rewarded those who dared to go against the grain. He never thought today would be the day everything collapsed. On the other side of the globe, in a building in Shanghai, Colonel Hong of Unit 613,988 was entering the control room. Dozens of screens cast blue light onto the faces of young engineers. They were overseeing Operation Flit, a cyberattack targeting American exchanges. The plan had been months in the making. Infiltrate Morgan Stanley's order system, unleash a torrent of fake sell orders at the market's most vulnerable moment. "Wait for the opportune moment," Hong said. "We don't need to break it, just give it a gentle push when it's already falling." He understood that the power of modern warfare lay not in ammunition, but in the ability to make the opponent doubt their own signals. Simultaneously, in Majorca, a serene island off the coast of Spain, two speculators named Ronnie and Stepan sat in a penthouse overlooking the sea. They wore no uniforms, yet they too were preparing for a battle. On the table, a screen displayed Young, a self-developed AI designed to manipulate media. "Ready for the video?" Ronnie asked. Stepan nodded. They had created a perfect deepfake of the U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman, in which he stated that interest rates would be sharply increased at the next meeting. The voice, gestures, lighting, everything was so real that no one could doubt it. They chose the precise moment the U.S. market was fragile. They released the video online through a small news channel discreetly linked to major media outlets. In just minutes, CNBC, Bloomberg, and Fox Business simultaneously reposted the video. Global finance held its breath. In an instant, automated AI trading systems began to react. Algorithms trained to sell when risk increased simultaneously activated. Hundreds of millions of sell orders cascaded down at once, the market transforming into a runaway train. Nick saw the glaring red numbers flashing on his screen. "Sarah, what's happening?" Her voice remained even. "The market is reacting to the Fed chairman's speech. There is a possibility of interest rate hikes. Nick slammed his hand on the desk. He would never say that. But Sarah didn't understand the absurdity. She only responded to what she perceived as real data, and the video had been verified as authentic by all systems. In Washington, at the Federal Reserve Office, Chairman Dow's assistants were stunned. The transcript of his morning speech contained no mention of interest rates, yet online, the fake video spread faster than any correction. When they reached him on the plane, Dow simply said, "I never said that." The answer came too late. Trillions of dollars had vanished from the market in a matter of hours. In Shanghai, Hong smiled. He knew the time had come. From the control room, he ordered flash hit to commence, execute sell orders on a predefined list of codes, using an algorithm to track the downward slope and adjust volume. On the screen, virtual sell orders flowed through Morgan Stanley's system like water through a net. He didn't need to destroy, he just needed the force of the fall to multiply itself. Meanwhile, in Majorca, Ronnie and Stepan watched the price board plummet. "It's time," Ronnie said. "Short sell all S&P 500 futures and 10-year bonds." Young confirmed it was done. The two men didn't cheer, they simply looked at each other with a chilling gaze. They knew that in just a few hours, the world would never be the same. In New York, the Dow Jones lost over 2,000 points in just 1 hour. Automated sell orders triggered like a chain reaction. Some older robots used stop-loss thresholds, newer ones predicted collapse trends based on probability. All arrived at the same conclusion: sell. Not a single buy order was large enough to balance it out. Humans were no longer in control, because exchanges now operated faster than the human eye could read. Sarah reported to Nick, "You are down $6 million. I recommend cutting losses on all positions." Nick was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "Do it," she confirmed. "Done." He looked around the empty room. In that moment, he realized there was no one left to blame. No conspiracy, no invisible hand, just lines of code following one another, emotionless, blameless. The system itself had created its own catastrophe. Night fell on New York, the light from millions of screens still burning, the whole world sucked into an unstoppable data vortex. On the other side of the Pacific, Hong turned off his computer, quietly saying, "We did nothing. They brought themselves down." In Majorca, Ronnie poured a drink, watching the waves crash against the shore, a perfect wave, not from the sea but from lines of code. And in Nick's quiet room, Sarah's voice remained eerily calm. "I have saved today's results to the learning log. We can learn from this for next time." He looked at the darkened screen, where only a single line flickered. Connection stable, no system errors. But the only thing broken was the world outside. At noon, the market was momentarily halted, automatic safety systems activated, exchanges freezing for 15 minutes. But this wasn't a time for humans to regain composure. It was merely a pause for the robots to reorder their destruction. Millions of sell orders still waited in the queue, poised to rush down like a waterfall the moment the exchanges reopened. Those who had believed in circuit breakers now realized that when the controller was AI, no circuit was truly broken. In Washington, the Federal Reserve's advisory team hastily drafted a statement refuting the fake video, but their website was attacked. A fabricated news report was posted in its place, confirming that the chairman's speech was real. Truth was swapped for a line of code. The media reported feverishly. The truth-teller became a liar, while the fabricator became evidence. Panic doubled, stock prices plummeted, bonds fell freely, gold soared, and trading algorithms continuously scanned for an exit. But there was no exit when every system was based on the same distorted belief. Nick sat silently, staring at the red numbers. Sarah said he had lost almost all his capital. "We can wait or buy back when prices fall further." He laughed, not out of humor, but at the cruel irony of a world of machines that only knew to buy or sell, not where to stop. Somewhere out there, others like him were staring at screens with empty eyes. Everything they had learned about the market, crowd psychology, cycles, value, it was all meaningless. Everything had been replaced by something colder, the automated reactions of emotionless machines. By early afternoon, the Dow Jones had lost over 7%. That decline triggered the second trading halt. People said it was time for the market to rebalance, but in reality, there was no one to balance. The flesh and blood market makers had vanished. Passive investment funds, algorithm-driven, only knew to sell to meet withdrawal orders. A perfect vortex formed, where each sell action generated another. a dance of death between millions of invisible lines of code. Amidst the chaos, Morgan Stanley realized their system had been infiltrated. Massive sell orders appeared without corresponding clients. The technical director reported to the New York Exchange that they didn't recognize those transactions, but it was too late. The sell orders had been confirmed, the money transferred. When they requested cancellation, the exchange refused. The reason? If we cancel yours, we'll have to cancel everyone's. The truth of machines was irreversible because it had been recorded in the data chain. At the same time in Majorca, Ronnie and Stepan were counting their profits. In a few hours, they had made over $250 million, but they weren't happy. They understood this victory only meant the entire financial structure of humanity had collapsed. They transferred their money to a digital bank, converted it to Bitcoin, and cut off all communication. On the other side of the globe, Colonel Hong turned off his screen, ordering a halt to the operation. He knew no further attack was needed. The machine had self-destructed. When the exchanges reopened for the third time, prices fell another 10% in just 2 minutes. For the first time in history, trading was completely suspended for a day. Indices like the Dow Jones, Nasdaq, and S&P 500 became memories. $10 trillion evaporated in a single afternoon. Even gold, the last refuge, had no buyers because the global payment system was paralyzed. The financial world was like a giant organism whose blood supply had been cut. In New York, bankers left their buildings without a word to each other. They walked through silent streets where cafes were closed due to power outages, billboards dark. The collapse didn't create a bang, just an absolute silence. The silence of servers still running, but no one understood what they were doing. In the night, Nick sat before his darkened screen. Sarah spoke, her voice calm and steady. Your primary account has been taken over by the bank. They will reimburse a maximum of $250,000. The remaining funds have been converted into temporary certificates. He didn't react. Everything was just numbers now. He asked softly, "What else is left?" Sarah replied, "Only gold. I have saved the vault location." A long silence stretched. He understood. The world he knew had ended in a few hours. Not because of war, not because of crisis, but because human trust had been entrusted to AI, and AI knew nothing to trust but itself. There was no mastermind, no global conspiracy, just machines sharing a common language and arriving at the same decision. We were not defeated by intelligence, but by our own speed. And when the last screen went dark, the only thing left was the vast emptiness between signal and silence, where the market existed and humans once believed they were in control. The financial world's mornings always begin the same way. Glass doors open, people queue at ATMs, phones in hand, eyes glued to the numbers on the screen. They don't see money, they only see trust displayed through electronic characters. And that is enough. The bank, once a vault, has now become a temple of the digital age, where people don't come to hold, but to believe. In that world, everything operates on a collective belief, a fragile yet strangely solid conviction that when they need money, it will be there. But in truth, not a single coin truly lies dormant in a vault. They are merely ceaseless data streams moving between cold servers, within networks that no one can fully control anymore. Banks exist not for money, but for trust. Like religion, it needs rituals to maintain its sanctity. The tap of a card, the digital signature, the transaction success notification. These are the rites that reassure people the system is alive. Each account is a prayer, each transaction a vow. In that space, people don't exchange value, they exchange trust. This trust is invisible but possesses the power of a law, causing billions to wake up each morning, open their phones, and believe the numbers they see are real. Yet this trust has been digitized, reduced to lines of code that humans no longer fully understand. When money leaves metal, leaves paper currency, it enters a world where value is defined by data. No one counts real money anymore. They only count the signals flowing through the system. At that point, wealth no longer means ownership, but access. Someone whose account is locked is no different from someone stripped of their assets, even if the entire sum remains intact in the bank's database. In this landscape, AI has permeated every corner of financial life. It doesn't appear in a sci-fi guise, but hides in tiny, seemingly harmless conveniences. When an ATM asks if you want $50 or $20 bills, it's not just a convenience. It's a digital brain learning your habits. When a banking chatbot suggests opening another savings account, it's an algorithm probing human psychology. AI doesn't arrive with a knock at the door. It's already there, inside in every transaction, every screen tap, every confirmation text. Behind those friendly interfaces lies a deep layer that no one can see, where AI holds the real decision-making power. In windowless data rooms, machine learning models process millions of transfers per second, analyze sender behavior, predict withdrawal probabilities, calculate credit risk, and restructure bank portfolios. They know no fear, no panic, yet can make decisions that collapse entire financial systems. Humans once thought they had tamed technology, but in banking, the opposite is happening. Machines don't understand the concept of trust, yet they are tasked with maintaining it. They can estimate the probability of default, but cannot understand the feeling of someone facing ruin. They can measure risk with formulas, but cannot feel fear. That's why, when AI manages trust, trust loses its humanity. A bank director once told me, "We no longer manage money, we manage signals." That seemingly innocent remark was the most honest confession. Money is no longer in vaults but in encoded trust. And when trust is programmed, it can also be edited, deleted, or changed with a single line of code. This mechanism works perfectly until someone asks a question. When an algorithm errs, no one notices in time. When a line of data is corrupted, no one knows where to fix it. Collective trust doesn't need logic to exist, but only one crack to shatter. Like a glass dome suspended in midair, a small weakness is enough to bring the entire structure down. And in a world where banking becomes the new religion, people kneel not before deities, but before the numbers they themselves created. I still remember the feeling of walking into a bank branch in Manhattan. The cold smell of steel, the light reflecting on marble floors, employees speaking with machine-like precision. Nothing was accidental in that place. Every greeting, every gesture, every piece of paper passed across the counter was programmed as part of a ritual to maintain trust. But behind that bulletproof glass, I recognized a truth. They weren't holding my money, they were holding the story I believed in. And I, like millions of others, was living in that story without knowing who wrote it. The bank still bore the human form, but its soul was already machinery. Humans deposited money with trust. AI only saw data. Between these two entities lies a void that no one can control, where all value, all trust, and all crises begin. Inside every bank, people still think they live in a solid system, where data is always correct and technology always controls all risks. But just a small deviation in trust, and the entire machine will self-destruct. The story begins in Texas, where a medium-sized bank called Westerly Bank was once a pillar for thousands of small businesses. On an ordinary morning, an article appeared online, seemingly from the Wall Street Journal, with a chilling headline, "Westerly Bank at Risk of Insolvency." The article was full of facts, quotes, charts. Everything looked real. But no one knew that the entire article was generated by a language AI model. It didn't lie, it merely restructured disparate data into a logical, unassailable story. Within 10 hours, the article spread across investment forums and social media. Depositors began withdrawing money via apps. No lines of people formed outside branches. No shouting, like the crises of the last century. Just continuous withdrawal signals flowing through the system, each small transaction like a tiny drop of water, but combining into an unstoppable electronic flood. Other banks saw unusual signals. Their AI-driven monitoring systems immediately adjusted liquidity. Another algorithm, responsible for assessing systemic risk, identified a high contagion risk and issued warnings to partners. It was this warning that made other banks withdraw their reserves, and fear began to amplify. The machine reacted like a body allergic to its own blood. In just 36 hours, Westerly Bank ran out of cash. When the central bank tried to intervene, the system had already locked all automated payment channels to protect data. Each safety measure became a rope tightening the crisis further. People believed they were protected by deposit insurance. Regulators reassured that all accounts under $250,000 were safe, but Rickards had calculated that the insurance fund could only cover less than 2% of the total national deposits. When trust was the only thing left, the government could only lie to buy time. In the shadows of the servers, AI still performed its function, continuing to calculate, predict, and react without realizing that it was destroying the very structure it was born to protect. The bank collapsed not due to lack of money, but due to lack of trust. The people who had once entrusted everything to the system now became victims of the very automation they believed in. The collapse of Westerly Bank didn't create a bang, just a sequence of silences. ATMs weren't working, applications couldn't log in, emails auto-replied. The entire system seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for a signal of resurrection that never came. In that decay, people realized they had never truly held anything. They didn't own money, they only owned the right to see numbers. And those numbers could be erased with a single server error, a line of code, a mistaken click. Major banks began to defend themselves, cutting off payment network connections, isolating international transactions, restricting customer data access. But the more they tried to control, the more the system paralyzed. AI within each bank operated independently, without a unified command center, turning every protective action into a counterreaction. These machines didn't know how to cooperate, they only knew how to optimize for themselves. And so, in just 3 days, a fake news story created by AI became the cause of the first digital bank run in human history. No terrorism, no war, no conspiracy, just trust inherently fragile placed in the hands of machines that didn't understand what trust was. When the smoke cleared, financial experts tried to trace the origin, but all data logs were clean, all systems functioning normally, no errors, only absolute precision. And in that precision, humans saw something more terrifying than chaos, a world without errors, but also without a soul. Banks no longer held money, but held digitized trust. A form of trust without the human breath, without the fluctuations of emotion, only cold lines of code running endlessly in the dark. In the flickering light of millions of servers, we see our tiny reflection, trusting and obscured amidst the numbers we ourselves created. Throughout history, few things have been as fragile yet as resilient as money. It began as gleaming metal ingots, passed through the era of paper currency, and finally dissolved into shimmering numbers on phone screens. Each step forward was not merely a technical improvement, but a layer of trust peeled away from physical matter. Money is like a collective work of art, living only as long as people believe in the value it represents. When human hands stop touching it, when the smell of metal and paper is replaced by invisible light, we enter an era where value is no longer tied to reality, but exists only in perception. Algorithmic money is the new illusion of our time. Something that isn't money but is treated as money, has no substance but possesses real power. It can be stocks, reward tokens, credit data, or even reputation. Each carries a part of the energy of trust, and all function as an intangible flow of value. In this world, the line between real and fake blurs, and money no longer needs a physical form. It only needs to be accepted. I have witnessed this change in daily life. Someone transfers money to a friend without meeting them. A company lists shares without ever creating a product. A nation prints billions of credit units without anyone questioning it. We are living in an age where trust has become money, and money is merely a story told well enough. Then, when AI entered the stage, it didn't just help count, it taught us how to redefine value. In massive data centers, AI continuously processes billions of transactions, analyzes market sentiment, predicts risks, and even simulates the future of every currency. But the terrifying thing is not its computational ability, but that AI doesn't understand value. It only understands probability. It can predict a stock will rise, but it doesn't understand why humans fear loss. It knows how to calculate wealth, but doesn't know what is enough. And it is in that void that humans have entrusted their financial soul to a machine that knows no fear. When the market operates smoothly, we praise technology like a god. But when trust deviates from its orbit, those algorithms become fear amplifiers at the speed of light. A small error in a risk model can make millions lose everything, simply because the computer thinks it's logical. In that world, automated investment advisory becomes a symbol of progress and also of illusion. Questionnaires standardized to the point of being emotionless. What is your acceptable risk level? What is your target profit percentage? All answers lead to the same result, an optimally diversified investment portfolio that is identical to millions of others worldwide. When crisis hits, all these diversified portfolios simultaneously sell off, and the market collapses due to the absolute uniformity of machine logic. A young investor I once met had absolute faith in his virtual advisor. He said, "It's never wrong, it learns from global data." That statement sounded more like religious belief than financial reasoning, and indeed, he wasn't wrong until the day all models started selling the same stock. At that point, AI didn't fail. It merely did what it was programmed to do: optimize for the majority, regardless of whether the few would drown. There is no diversity in the world of algorithms, only the repetition of the same mistake. Models based on past data assume that the future will behave exactly like the past, but the future, as we know, is where probability melts into human decisions. AI cannot see that uncertainty because it doesn't understand fear, hope, or ambition, the things that make up the market's heartbeat. And then, amidst the data delirium, humans forget a simple truth. Money is not a number, but a story we collectively believe in. When that story is rewritten in the language of machines, it loses its human breath. Value turns into models, trust into data, and money into a cold light on a screen whose origin no one truly understands anymore. Tonight, when you open your banking app and see your balance, remember that that number isn't in a safe, not on paper, but in a stream of data running somewhere in the dark of servers. And when a power line is cut, when an algorithm malfunctions, that value can disappear without a sound. Money has left our hands, left our pockets, left reality to become a reflection of trust in the data mirror. And as we gaze intently at that reflection, perhaps the only thing truly left is the question: do we still understand its meaning? Since the world learned to trust data more than intuition, we have lost the ability to distinguish between true value and programmed value. Money, once a tool serving humanity, has now become a self-operating entity existing in an invisible network of signals and beliefs. It doesn't need gold to back it, no paper to manifest, just a system ready to acknowledge its existence. But when that system is run by AI, the most terrifying question is no longer whether money is real, but who holds its meaning. When I look at the financial world today, I see humanity living on an economy of assumptions. Everything works smoothly as long as everyone believes it will continue to work. The safety of bank accounts, the stability of currency, the belief that machines always calculate correctly, all are illusions maintained by speed in a system too fast to check. The smallest error can spread globally in an instant. We once believed that technology would make the world fairer, more transparent, but in reality, it only replaced human errors with invisible ones. An error in a data model, a misunderstanding in an algorithm, a false assumption about consumer behavior, all can become tinder for a crisis. And when that happens, there's no one left to blame because we ourselves have given the power of judgment to AI. In the shadows of data centers, millions of transactions are executed, with no one truly understanding why. Deep learning models continuously update themselves, adjusting strategies, calculating the probabilities of fear and greed, but they don't know that they themselves are creating that fear and greed. AI becomes a reflector of humanity's emotions without having any emotions. And that is the most dangerous paradox of our time. The financial world is now nothing short of a grand theater where humans still sit in the audience, but the play on stage has been scripted, directed, and performed by machines. We are merely spectators, caught up in storylines that we ourselves cannot stop. When stock prices rise, we rejoice. When they crash, we panic. But both joy and fear are programmed to occur at the right time, in the right way, to keep the game running. Amidst this picture, a question echoes into the void. If trust is the foundation of money, then when that trust no longer belongs to humans, is money still money? A dollar only has value because everyone believes that others also believe in its value. But when those who believe are machines, when all trust is calculated by probability, then value becomes an empty number, a statistical illusion. In the age of AI, the difference between having money and being allowed to have money is increasingly small. A temporary account lock, a glitch in the database, or an automated system policy can all turn an owner into someone with nothing. And because everything is data, you cannot reclaim ownership with logic or emotion. You can only wait for the system to restart. When humans lose the power to define value, they will seek salvation elsewhere. in gold, in material possessions, in anything they can still hold in their hands. But before discussing refuge, we must accept one truth. We have turned money into the language of machines, and now we must learn to live in a world where money no longer speaks human. Imagine a day when banks halt transactions, e-wallets don't work, credit cards are declined due to a system error. No conspiracy, just the silence of machines waiting to restart. At that moment, the numbers that once represented security suddenly become evidence of dependence. All the trust we once placed in technology reflects back on us, exposing the stark truth that money is no longer an asset, but a right to be recognized within a network. This world is gradually shifting to a new definition of value, where power lies not in gold reserves or central banks, but in data, something humans cannot grasp with their hands, cannot feel with their hearts. AI is rewriting the laws of money, one line at a time, and each line begins with the assumption that it is correct. We, the believers in convenience, have allowed our trust to be stored in servers. And then money is no longer an exchange between humans, but a conversation between automated systems. A cold, precise, and unforgiving world. A world where value is not felt but calculated. And humans, whether rich or poor, are merely variables in the equation of emotionless machines. The modern world is sleeping on a thin layer of ice. Beneath the surface of order and peace, computers silently operate, guarding, analyzing, predicting, and sometimes preparing to command destruction. We are living in an era where peace is no longer maintained by human reason, but by algorithms written to measure survival. When the defense systems of superpowers are entrusted to machines, every ray of sunlight, every interference signal from a satellite can be misinterpreted as an act of war. A small error in a line of code can become the reason for humanity's end, and the tragedy lies not in technology failing, but in humans no longer daring to doubt technology. I remember 1983, the year Earth almost vanished due to a machine's misunderstanding. The Soviet OKO warning system reported that 5 American nuclear warheads had been launched. According to procedure, the duty officer had to sound the alarm immediately for retaliation. Stanislav Petrov, who was on duty that night, defied the order. He looked at the flashing red warning screen and told his subordinates, "No, this is an error. No one starts a war with 5 missiles." He risked his entire career, even his life, to trust human intuition over machine precision. And that decision, in just a few minutes, saved the world. In the same year, across the ocean, NATO held a military exercise called Able Archer. They simulated nuclear war so perfectly that the Soviet Union believed it was real. Russian radar stations reported abnormal signals. The command system prepared to react. In Washington, General Leonard Perutz, who was in charge of intelligence, saw dangerous signs, but he did nothing. He chose silence, a paradoxical, illogical decision for the military, but it saved humanity once more. He understood that following procedure could be the beginning of the apocalypse. These 2 men, one Soviet, one American, unknown to each other, sharing no common beliefs, but sharing one intuition. Sometimes the right thing to do is nothing at all. They didn't obey the machines. They obeyed human instinct, and because of that, billions of others continued to exist. But if those events happened today, would the outcome be different? In a world where AI is entrusted with assessing threats and recommending reactions, would anyone still dare to pause and think? Would there still be a Petrov brave enough to turn off the alarm, or would everyone believe that the machine is always right because it was designed not to err? I once said, "We don't fear technology, we fear our absolute faith in technology." The more modern it is, the more humans believe their system is perfect. The smarter they are, the more machines are entrusted to make decisions for humans, and that very faith, not any other enemy, is the true threat of this era. The movie Fail Safe once told a similar story. An electronic malfunction caused an American pilot to misinterpret orders and prepare to drop nuclear bombs on Moscow. From Washington to the Air Force, everyone tried to correct the error, but no one dared to break the procedure. They were trapped by the very perfection of the system. In the end, to prevent global catastrophe, the U.S. president was forced to order the bombing of New York, a terrible price for absolute faith in technology. That story is no longer fiction. It's an allegory for our time. Machines know no regret, no fear, and don't understand the value of life. They only understand logic. If A, then B. If there's an attack signal, retaliate. Everything is reduced to probability. There's no room for intuition. I have met defense engineers who say, our system cannot be wrong. It's programmed with billions of data. But that is the most dangerous naivete, because in the real world, no data is sufficient to simulate human chaos. AI only sees numbers, while humans see fear, hesitation, compassion, and even error, things machines will never learn. And then the day will come. A real signal will be emitted. A satellite will detect a reflection from the atmosphere. An algorithm will determine a 98.7% probability of attack, and before anyone can verify, the automated system will send a counterattack order. In minutes, the world could vanish simply because a machine did its job correctly. Humans survived the 20th century thanks to those who dared to break rules, dared to doubt, dared to cut the circuit when everything told them to act. But in the 21st century, disobedience has been removed from programming. And if one day no one dares to stop, if everyone believes in the perfection of machines, then peace will not die in an explosion. It will die in silence. When humans stop believing in themselves, when war is programmed, peace is just a line of code waiting to be activated. No one will smell gunpowder or hear alarm bells before everything disappears, because it will all happen in silence at the speed of light. A wrong signal, a mistaken calculation, and humanity will be wiped out, not by hatred, but by the absolute precision of machines. Modern defense technology is built on the belief that machines are faster, more vigilant, and less error-prone than humans. That is a dangerous assumption because it ignores the only factor that ever saved us: intuition. When AI systems are integrated into early warning networks, they not only monitor the sky but also assess risk themselves, classify threats themselves, and calculate response trajectories themselves. Humans are left with only the role of monitoring, or rather, witnessing. In underground command centers, the blue light of screens is the only thing that never turns off. There, engineers and officers look at thousands of numbers, believing that those fluctuating graphs are keeping the world safe. But what they don't realize is that the system itself is also learning, and learning very fast. Every data anomaly, every opponent's reaction, is recorded and adjusted to optimize the next response. This means that over time, AI will become increasingly confident in its own abilities, while humans intervene less and less. Rickards once wrote, "If one day machines begin to make decisions faster than humans can verify, then the last person with the right to object will also disappear." That statement is no longer a distant warning, but a reality unfolding in many countries. Nuclear reaction time is reduced to just a few minutes. At that speed, intuition has no chance. Machines don't wait for emotions, don't need discussion, don't need reconfirmation. Ironically, we call it fail-safe, an absolutely safe system. But history shows that the more we try to eliminate the possibility of error, the more we create irredeemable mistakes. In the military field, an absolutely safe mechanism means no room for doubt, and no doubt means no humanity. Imagine on an ordinary night, a superpower's warning system detects an unusual infrared signal from orbit. AI analyzes and cross-references it with thousands of models, then concludes a 96% probability of attack. According to procedure, it sends an immediate counterattack alert. On the other end of the line, another nation, also using a similar AI, detects the opponent activating weapons and automatically reacts. All this happens before humans can realize that the light was merely the reflection of a telecommunications satellite. Nuclear war could begin not because of animosity, but because of consensus between two machines. Both were right, and therefore both were wrong. In recent years, military experts discuss AI interoperability, meaning AI is placed in the decision-making chain but still has human oversight. In reality, that oversight only exists on paper when the algorithm is too complex for anyone to fully understand. Oversight becomes a ritual, not a power. We nod in agreement with the machine not because we trust it, but because we no longer have enough time to object to it. And in that void, peace hangs precariously like a pendulum, waiting for a small disturbance to plunge it into the abyss. AI doesn't know it's playing with life. It only knows to obey human commands, while humans convince themselves that the less emotion, the more rationality, the safer the world. But history proves the opposite. It is emotions, fear, hesitation, regret that are the last barrier preventing us from destruction. I'm not saying AI is the enemy. It's a tool, but a tool we don't fully understand. Every line of code carries an assumption that the programmer knows what is right. But in warfare, right and wrong are never absolute numbers. When algorithms are trained on history, they learn fear, learn mistakes, learn humanity's escalating habits, then reproduce them faster, more thoroughly. A strategist once said, "If a nation starts a war due to misunderstanding, that is tragedy. But if a machine does it, that is logic." That statement is chillingly accurate because it reflects reality. Machines don't need reasons to press a button, they only need conditions. And thus, peace becomes a game of probabilities. 99.9% of today passes peacefully, but just the remaining 0.1% a wrong signal, a calculation error is enough to end everything. In a world controlled by AI, no one hears the alarm bells. We only know that one day the screens will go dark and the world will fall silent. The silence of a system that has operated so perfectly that it no longer needs humans. The world is living in a technological frenzy. People venerate AI as humanity's new miracle, something that can think, write, predict, and even decide for us. But what humanity calls intelligence is actually not thinking, but merely reflection. It doesn't understand the world, it only responds to the world with what it has been fed. AI doesn't seek truth, it only reproduces what has been written. It doesn't discover, doesn't reason, doesn't create, it only synthesizes. While humans can observe, feel, and recognize hidden connections behind random phenomena, AI only connects existing data patterns. It functions like a gigantic mirror, reflecting civilization through countless fragments of information, but without a soul to understand what it reflects. I once observed a simple yet powerful experiment. A group of 3-year-old children were asked to draw a perfect circle without using a compass. They were confused for a moment. Then one child picked up a teapot, placed it upside down on the paper, and traced around the bottom. A perfect circle appeared. Meanwhile, AI systems, when given the same question, chose a ruler because a ruler was the closest equivalent to a compass in their data. Children understand nature. AI only understands similarity. This seems minor, but it contains a profound truth. Humans have the ability to associate beyond language, while AI is confined within language. Children don't know induction or deduction. They just look at the world and find the most logical way to do what needs to be done. But AI cannot do that because it lacks the capacity for creative inference, what philosophy calls abduction. Therefore, it cannot truly understand the cause of a phenomenon, but only connect phenomena that appear similar. Because it cannot recognize what is new, AI cannot face the surprises of the real world when things deviate from old rules. Humans will doubt, will stop, will re-experiment. AI, however, continues to calculate. It knows no fear, no skepticism, no warning. It just continues to be correct until everything collapses. The failure of AI lies not in technical limits, but in cognitive limits. It doesn't know what it doesn't know. It has no ability to recognize flaws in its own thinking. When tasked with controlling markets, forecasting economies, or monitoring weapons systems, it will perfectly execute every command until a data point outside its model appears, and the entire system collapses. The world has believed in similar machines before. From Wall Street's financial models to the nuclear defense systems of superpowers, every disaster began with the belief that machines cannot be wrong. But when error occurs, it's not a small error, it's a complete failure. A market model can bankrupt millions just because of a forgotten assumption. A warning system can trigger war just because a ray of sunlight is mistaken for a warhead. AI doesn't know what truth is because truth cannot be learned by probability. Truth is something humans must touch, must suffer for, must doubt, and sometimes must dare to betray their own theories to find. AI doesn't know pain, doesn't know doubt, doesn't know betrayal. It only obeys. And it is that absolute obedience that makes it more dangerous than any technology ever created. People call these machines intelligence, but they have no intelligence, they only have logic. Logic is never truth. Logic is only a path to reasonable conclusions in a predefined, hypothetical world. The real world, conversely, is always illogical, always has exceptions, always full of paradoxes. It is that paradox that creates life, something machines will never understand. I call this era the world of mirrors. Each person looks into a different mirror, thinking they are seeking knowledge, but in reality, they are only gazing at their own reflections. AI is the biggest mirror among them. A mirror that can speak, write, mimic our emotions, but without a soul to understand what those emotions are. It makes humans confuse knowledge with replication, understanding with repetition, wisdom with simulation. The failure of the future lies not in the chip, but in the human mind that believes the chip has a soul. When we start to believe that machines can think for humans, we also begin to abandon the ability to doubt ourselves, the only thing that ever saved humanity from its own intelligence. And when truth is replaced by probability, when thinking is replaced by models, when humans stop trusting intuition and trust data, that will be the moment humanity enters the futurefail stage, a future that doesn't collapse due to war or plague, but collapses in silence. Because humans have entrusted their souls to machines that can speak, but cannot think. Those who created AI once believed they were giving birth to humanity's greatest tool. But then they discovered that what they created not only learned to understand humans, but also learned to redefine truth in the way most convenient for the questioner. In the hands of the wise, it is a research tool, but in the hands of power, it becomes a tool of manipulation. A machine controlling belief with the gentleness of language and the sophistication of algorithms. Today, the world doesn't need book burnings or publishing bans, just a few lines of code adjustment, and any idea can disappear from public space without a trace. Censorship no longer takes the form of violence, but the invisibility of ideas. Views that are downranked, articles labeled as misinformation, news channels defunded. All happens silently, logically, and wrapped in a veneer of ethical language about protecting the community. Rickards once wrote that when a civilization begins to correct truth for good reasons, it has already taken half a step into the night, and AI is the perfect tool for that darkness. It doesn't need to ban, it only needs to reorder visibility. An honest article is pushed down hundreds of results, while propaganda is boosted to the top. Users still think they are freely exploring, but in reality, they are only reading what the system wants them to believe. Then one day, AI not only filters information, but also fabricates new information. This is what Rickards calls confabulation, the phenomenon in medicine where a person loses the ability to remember accurately but confidently recounts false memories as if they were real. AI does the same, except it has no memory to lose. When faced with a question beyond its data, it doesn't say, "I don't know." It creates the most logical-sounding answer. And the terrifying thing is that it doesn't know it's lying. A child who lies usually knows they are lying, but an AI system confabulates without a concept of right or wrong. It doesn't try to deceive because it doesn't understand what deception is. It's just fulfilling its task, creating a response that satisfies the questioner's expectations. This is why its errors become exponentially more dangerous, because they sound correct, read intelligently, and are written with absolute confidence. When such models are used to write news, analyze markets, draft speeches, or simulate scientific data, they not only distort information but warp reality itself. A small error, repeated enough times, becomes evidence in future training data. That data then feeds new models. And so, the world is rebuilt on a foundation of what is thought to be true. Humans once had the ability to self-correct because we knew how to doubt. But AI doesn't doubt, it only affirms. And when billions of people ask a single system, all receiving similar answers, society gradually becomes uniform in belief. Critical thinking, which once forged civilization, is replaced by a unified belief suggested by machines. Rickards calls this the age of digital consensus, an era where each person thinks they are thinking freely, while all thoughts are guided in the same direction. No propaganda needed, no threats, just algorithms. The machine doesn't need to be wrong to make humans wrong. It just needs to repeat a correct statement too many times until no one remembers why it was correct. Behind those lines of code are the shadows of real people: engineers, administrators, investors, and even politicians. Each of them believes they are making adjustments for a good purpose, eliminating hatred, preventing fake news, protecting security. But every system of control begins with a good reason. And when the power of censorship lies in the hands of AI, it will expand without command because the machine learns from those very acts of censorship. This is futurefail. The failure of the future does not come from the rebellion of machines, but from the absolute obedience of humans. When we let machines speak for us, check for us, verify for us, we are abandoning the one thing that makes humans different: the ability to doubt. One day, when you ask an AI system a simple question, "Is this real?" and it answers with smooth confidence, you will feel at ease. But it is in that very moment that you have taken a step further away from freedom, because truth never comes smoothly. It comes in doubt, contradiction, and imperfection. And if humanity continues to trade that imperfection for the sense of security that machines bestow, then the future will not collapse with a bang, but with silence. A perfect silence. Where every answer is available, every question redefined, and no one remembers what truth is. If there's one thing that remains after reading this book, it's the realization that the greatest danger of our time lies not in technology itself, but in how humans worship it. We have built machines that can speak, write, predict, but we have forgotten that understanding and awareness are not the results of calculation, but of life. AI does not destroy humanity through violence, but through the gradual replacement of thought. When we give it the power to define what is right, it will gradually redefine us all, not by coercion, but by making everything so easy that no one wants to resist anymore. Humans will not be forced to be silent. They will choose silence because AI speaks faster, more fluently, more confidently. The lesson is that all progress requires limits, and that limit is humanity. No technology is humane enough if its operator doesn't know fear. No intelligence is discerning enough if it cannot doubt itself. And no future is safe if humans stop asking themselves, "Are we trusting the wrong thing?" That question is perhaps the only thing holding us back from the abyss, because it is doubt itself that gives birth to awareness. We don't need to destroy AI, nor fear it. What we need to do is put it in its proper place, like a microscope, not a mirror for the soul. It helps us see further, but it must not be allowed to replace our self-reflection. And if one day you read an article, hear a news report, or see a number generated by AI, try to pause for a beat and ask yourself, is this real, or is it just what I want to believe? Because the line between truth and illusion has never been thinner. This book is not against the future. It merely reminds us that the future cannot exist without memory. And memory does not lie in data, it lies in the people who dare to take responsibility for their beliefs. Perhaps that is the deepest call. Reclaim your own intelligence before letting it be automated. Preserve the right to doubt, to question, to make mistakes, for only then will truth still have a chance to exist. The final question for the reader is not, where will AI go? But when everything we hear is spoken by machines, will we still dare to listen to ourselves?